Hello there my beloved Batties, and welcome to another episode of Truth Behind the Tale, the series where I take a look at some of our most famous fairy tales and delve into their real world historical and cultural origins. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Pied Piper of Hamelin. This one is pretty in-depth and there's a lot of threads to follow, or tunes to listen to. But before we begin this episode, I think it will be particularly helpful to summarise some key points from the fairy tale just to give us some context. During a time when the town of Hamelin was suffering from a rat infestation, a piper appeared wearing pied or coloured clothing and offered to expel all the pests from the town. He succeeded, but the mayor refused to pay the piper, so the piper vowed revenge. On St John and Paul's Day, 26th of June, when all the adults were in church, the piper led 130 of the town's children away, never to be seen again. Depending on the version of the story, he entices them to walk into the river the same way he did with the rat, takes them to the top of Koppelberg Hill or to a place called Koppenberg Mountain, or even into Transylvania. So that's the popular story. Now with those details in mind, let's move on to the history. Namely, it's a true story. The children of Hamelin really did disappear. The earliest known record comes from no less a source than Hamelin itself, a town in Lower Saxony, Germany, and dates back to the Middle Ages, 1284 to be precise. A reference to the story was included in a stained glass window in the church of Hamelin, which existed circa 1300, and while the window itself was destroyed in 1660, several accounts give us descriptions of it. It's been reconstructed based on these contemporary descriptions and features several children clad in white clothes being led away by a colourfully dressed piper. The original window is generally taken to have been created in order to memorialise a tragic event which happened in Hamelin, with the town records mentioning that in 1384 it is now 100 years since our children left. Around the same time, a chorus book was reported to be in the possession of a deacon of Hamelin, which contained an eyewitness account of the event in Latin verse. However, despite this general evidence and a large amount of research, there's no definitive explanation as to what happened to the children of Hamelin, but it almost certainly did not involve rats. Oh yeah, that's right, Squeaky, you heard me. Rat infestations were a problem in milling towns like Hamelin, but the connection to the children's exodus was only written into a version of the story from roughly 1559, almost 300 years after the first accounts of the piper. This episode of Truth Behind the Tale will therefore delve into the various possible explanations which have been put forward to explain the disappearance of the children. The major group of hypotheses is the emigration theory, so we're going to take a look at that first. By the 13th century, the time period in which the children are stated to have been lost according to the Hamelin town records, Lower Saxony was overcrowded, which led to the oldest sons of a family inheriting everything and leaving any younger siblings as serfs. It was also common during this time for locators to roam throughout northern Germany. These men were essentially a medieval subcontractor for a territorial lord or landlord, and they were responsible for clearing and appointing land which could be settled by people. The recruiters would travel around, sometimes in brightly coloured or pied clothing, and be like, "Hey, I can offer you seeds, ploughs and draft animals if you come with me to make this new town, and I'll pay you good money to do it too." This may account for the children vanishing, as it's been suggested that the children of the town could refer to any citizen of Hamelin, not just minors, and this is the explanation that you can find on the Hamelin official website. Though there's also the suggestion that the disappearance just wasn't documented because the children were sold to the recruiters. This was a common practice at the time, especially involving the illegitimate, orphaned, and those who a community simply couldn't support, according to Sheila Harty. The recruiters would often come from the Baltic lands in Eastern Europe, as well as Pomerania and East Prussia, and jumped on the German drive to colonise new lands. This theory is further solidified by Wolfgang Mieder in his book The Pied Piper, a Handbook. He claims that historical documents exist which show that parts of Transylvania were settled by people from the Lower Saxony area. Transylvania itself had greatly suffered due to long reigns by Mongol invaders, led by two of Genghis Khan's grandsons, and the dates match the 13th century, the earliest appearance of the legend of the Piper. Genealogist Dick Eastman also did some digging, namely in Poland, and managed to find a connection between surnames which were common in the Hamelin area with those found in Poland. Rather than the Slavic names typical for the area, several were definitively Germanic. This is further supported by work done by linguist Jürgen Udolf, who found that several German place names ran in a straight line from the Hamelin area to Pomerania, which is now a part of Poland. Udolf suggests that after the Danes were defeated in the 1227 Battle of Bornhoft, the southern Baltic region, which was then inhabited mainly by Slavs, was open for colonisation by Germans. The bishops and dukes sent out the locators to find able-bodied young men and women who were willing to come to the new settlements and, thanks to their cunning promises of great things, were able to secure thousands of people, potentially including the children from Hamelin. But while that's the main and arguably most historically sound group of theories, there are others too. An early German account is found in the Lüneburg manuscript from the mid-15th century. Translated, it says, "In the year 1284, on the day of St. John's and Paul, on the 26th of June, 130 children born in Hamelin were misled by a piper clothed in many colours to Calvary near the Koppen, and lost." Koppen may come from the High German Kupp, which means a knoll or a domed hill, and could mean one of the several hills that surround Hamelin. It could also be a reference to the forest near Koppenbrück, where, according to a modern theory, the children were lured by a pagan or heretic sect for ritual dancing, before being killed during a sinkhole collapsing or a sudden landslide. This might sound rather far-fetched, but it could connect to popular medieval themes such as the Dance Macabre, the Dance of Death, with the figure of the piper symbolising death and leading away the victims of a mass death, perhaps caused by starvation or disease. On the flip side, it's also been suggested that the piper was perhaps a symbol of hope who drove the plague-ridden rats away after a deadly epidemic. The idea of the Dance of Death, or dancing in general, brings us to the idea that the children may have suffered from dancing mania. This was an incident of mass psychogenic illness, essentially a rapid spread of symptoms in a cohesive group which seemed completely based on the nervous system with no corresponding physical signs. It was a social phenomenon which mainly occurred in mainland Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries, and would involve sometimes thousands of people dancing erratically until they literally collapsed from exhaustion. Attempts to control and cure it were largely guesswork. One of the most prevalent was musicians accompanying the dancers because the music was thought to treat them, but it often had the opposite effect of encouraging even more people to join in. People dance to music, who would have thought it, right? Nevertheless, it's interesting to note that one outbreak occurred in Erfurt, a town in central Germany, in 1237, only 50 years before the first mention of the Hamelin Exodus. A large group of children danced, skipped and jumped to Arnstadt, a town 12 miles away. And yet another theory suggests that the children left Hamelin as part of a pilgrimage or even as a military campaign, including perhaps a second children's crusade. These stories are said to have been constructed by the town people as a way to explain the disappearance so that they could avoid the wrath of the church or the king. The Children's Crusade in particular occurred in 1212 and was led by European Christians in an attempt to retake the Holy Land from the Muslims. The narrative, which might be most closely tied to the legend of the Piper, is mixed a little bit between history and legend, somewhat similar to what happened with King Connemore in Bluebeard. But the traditional narrative involves bands of children being marched throughout Europe, being told by merchants that they were being taken to the Holy Land, but they were truly taken to slave markets. We may never know the reality of what made 130 people leave Hamelin on the 26th of June 1284, but they've contributed to a legend which has been immortalised around the world. In the years since the disappearance, the story has spread into legend and was collected most famously by the Brothers Grimm. The town of Hamelin welcomes tourists fascinated by the legend. Every Sunday in the summer, the story is told by actors in the town centre, and while not directly connected to the Piper, the rat catcher's house still stands, with the inscription of the 15th century Lüneburg manuscript on its facade, and is now a Pied Piper themed restaurant. 26th of June is marked as Rat Catcher's Day. In 2009, the town held a festival to celebrate the 725th anniversary of the event, and the town also offers a Hamelin edition of Monopoly. And lastly, the street, which is believed to be the last place the children were seen, does not allow dancing or music to this day. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Truth Behind the Tale. This was an episode I was so excited to do, and it's been quite heavily requested, so I've been really happy to actually sit down and create this one. It was so much fun. I really like the fairy tales and stories which I find are directly linked to an actual historical event or actual people, so this was fantastic. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a big thumbs up if you did, and please consider leaving me a comment and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It would be great to have you as part of our little Batty family. I release new videos every single week, and the next episode of Truth Behind the Tale will be coming on the last Tuesday of next month. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, stay safe, and I'll see you all again very soon in another video. Bye!